So with that in mind, I would like to introduce our first of the year speaker from the 24-25 lecture series. We have a wonderful presenter today named Alex Goetz, and he is more local and do you live in Toledo now?
I do,
Yeah, Toledo now, but he's hardly ever at home, so I used to try to get him to do it. He's a co-founder of Running Wild for the Wild Media, and he has also had and worked with National Geographic, BBC, PBS, CNN, CBS, and he's a winner in the National Geographic Wild to Inspire film. An Ohio native, some of the extensive travels. He's been to the Tasmania filming, Tasmanian Devils, and the Blue Penguins, and he has been on the Marshall Islands. He's been all over Australia, etc. He is a 2019 Emerging Wildlife Conservation Leader and has done some TED Talks, etc. So you're in for a really, really good thing. I heard him a year, no, 6 months ago maybe, and I was captivated by him. I thought we got to get him here. So Alex, you're on. Thank you.
All right. You guys might have to be patient for just 1 second while I switch over our Zoom here. Okay. Can you see me over there on that laptop?
Expand it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
there it is.
All right. Thank you for having me out. Thanks to S.A.V.E. Thank you everybody for coming out tonight and everybody who's tuning in on Zoom. Hopefully the technology works as we click around and we show some different video clips. Really excited to be here speaking with you all tonight. So I really appreciate you coming out. As she mentioned, my name is Alex Goetz, and I started a production company called Running Wild Media. And our company specifically focuses on telling stories of wildlife and conservation around the world. So our work has taken us all over the place to some of the coldest places on the planet. Like here in Yellowstone, filming in -40 degrees in the middle of the winter, trying to film gray wolves. To some remote rainforests of Indonesia, trying to film animals like the endangered helmeted hornbill that you can see here on the right. Its beak is actually worth 3 times more than elephant ivory on the black market. And so we were telling a story about local poachers who have now turned protectors of this bird. And you could see me in our wonderful camp location in the middle of this remote rainforest. Giving this is a little heart symbol that they would all do over there in Indonesia. I look pretty miserable because it was pretty rough. To some of the hottest places on the world. So here in the Namib Desert in Africa, where it was probably about 120 degrees, and way off in the distance, you can see a Gemsbach in the only little bit of shade it could find in the middle of the desert, and me wrapped up trying to keep my bald head from getting sunburnt. And all over the Caribbean filming different animals. And while it's one thing to get up here and talk about it, I would love to show you guys just a short video of some of our favorite shots from recent projects we've produced over the past couple of years. 1 second, let me switch over to a different way of doing our audio. Between all the Zoom and everything, it's just, let me see. There we go. Thanks for being patient. Right. Thank you. So how do we get to this job? How do you get to do something like this? Growing up, I knew I wanted to do something with wildlife. I didn't know what job or career opportunity that would be. I thought it might be a biologist or a zookeeper or, some sort of scientist. I quickly learned as I went through my grades that I'm miserable at math. And a lot of my job opportunities that I thought were there when it came to working with animals really centered strongly around math and science. So it was a little bit discouraging, feeling like those might not be tangible goals for me. It wasn't until about high school that somebody had shown me Planet Earth, the David Attenborough program, for the first time. And it just blew my mind. I had grown up watching things like Animal Planet and Discovery Channel, but I had never seen something like Planet Earth. And it just kind of all clicked in that moment that, like, oh, people have to film this stuff to be able to show us these amazing programs like these BBC programs. And in that moment, I remember standing up while watching it. I think there was like a hummingbird sequence going on where all these slow motion shots of hummingbirds are flying around. And I was like, this is what I want to do for a living. And so I went to Bowling Green State University. I studied film and I minored in environmental science. And while there, I worked at our local PBS station. And my now business partner, film partner, Justin Grubb, was studying biology. And he actually came into the PBS station one day and he pitched somebody to do a wildlife show with him. He wanted to be the next Jack Hanna. He grew up in Columbus, going to the Columbus Zoo all the time. And he kind of had a similar goal in mind that he really wanted to make wildlife documentaries. So of course I was like, yes, we will go film wildlife documentaries. And that has kickstarted what has been a 12-year journey of traveling all over the world filming animals. In college, we lived pretty frugally, saving up all of our money, eating next to nothing, just like carrots, sticks, and raisins so that we could afford to do trips around the Caribbean to places like Costa Rica and Honduras, trying to just build up a portfolio that we could use to try and, find ways to make this a living. After a while of filming enough wildlife, we put together a short film that we submitted to a National Geographic film competition, the Wild to Inspire competition, submitted it and ended up winning. And our prize was spending 5 weeks filming for National Geographic in Africa. And so we traveled all around Africa, all around South Africa, Mozambique, Namibia, Botswana, living out of this truck that you see down in the corner here. So on the top, there was a pop-up tent. We had another little tent you could set up on the ground. So we would rotate shifts. Somebody got like the luxurious top tent some nights while somebody had to go sleep on the ground where all the animals were at. But we were just living in the national parks for essentially 5 weeks, filming whatever we could find. It was a pretty amazing experience. And actually in this photo truck we were stuck in the sand and the sun was setting quickly and we were in this national park that if we didn't get out, like we were going to get in pretty big trouble. So we were trying to figure out what we could do to get unstuck from this. Obviously, we made it out. I'm here, but this job has taken us since then to some pretty amazing places I would have never expected, some really remote locations around the world. One of those being the Marshall Islands. And right here is actually the capital of the Marshall Islands. I believe it's one of 1,000 small barrier islands. And this is Majuro. And for anybody who doesn't know where the Marshall Islands are at, you have this big void of blue, which, you know, you think is just empty. But smack dab in the middle there, between Australia and Hawaii, which is in the upper right corner, are the Marshall Islands. And so what we were doing there was we were working with a team from the California Academy of Sciences, living on this research vessel for 2.5 weeks, traveling around the islands. And we were filming this research team that was one of only 2 teams in the world that could scuba dive to depths of 500 feet. And so what they were doing was they were going all around the world, doing these scuba diving expeditions, trying to find brand new species of fish on deep coral reefs that they could take to local governments to be like, you have a new species, one that can only be found here in this country. You need to protect these coral reefs. And so while we were there documenting that project, they actually discovered 2 brand new species of fish that they could use to talk to the Marshallese government about conservation of the reef ecosystem. Fun fact, this ship is not that big. It looks bigger than it really was. There were about 16 or 17 of us crammed into this boat. Only about 2 bathrooms between all of us. And the first one broke like day 1. We ran out of fresh drinking water like a week into our 2.5 week long trip. And so we were drinking like rum and Coca-Cola and like bottles.
Alex, excuse me a minute. Could someone in the presentation room mute their microphone? We can hear all your conversations and it's disruptive to the speaker. Thank you.
I'll take care of it.
All right, cool. We're working on muting everybody on Zoom right now. Since then, back in 2020, we have been asked to, or 2022, I'm sorry, we've been asked to travel to Turks and Caicos to film for a PBS, a nationally broadcast PBS program called Evolution Earth. And so while there, we were working with this researcher, you were holding this K anole, which is a type of lizard, who had just discovered that after a series of hurricanes, the physical foot size of these lizards had drastically changed. And so we were telling the story of kind of the rapid adaptation of these lizards through different hurricanes. And so I'll share a little scene from that now.
What we're learning in the Galapagos Islands is animals have a far greater ability to adapt to a changing world than we thought. And you know, it's not just here. Stories of extreme evolution are popping up on islands everywhere. We got an inside tip about a discovery in the Caribbean that's changing the textbooks. Of all the stories in the series, this one's one of my personal favorites because my obsession is lizards. In 2017, it's hurricane season. And no one knows it yet, but weeks from now, 2 Category 5 storms will rip through the islands. It's the perfect setup to discover something wild. All you need is the right person in the right place at the right time.
Probably walk a little bit behind the pile where the palmetto trees are. That's a good area.
You're the expert, my man. Lead the way. Like me, Anthony Harrell is into lizards in a big way.
I mean, I'm probably among the few people in the world that know quite a bit about lizards, so I would say I'm a lizard expert.
Getting to catch up with Anthony is pretty cool. He actually took me on my very first field trip back when I was an undergrad student. And you might think tracking down lizards in the undergrowth is kind of weird. And maybe it is, but it still gets me fired up. Anthony is looking for a very special population of the tiny lizards, with a surprisingly big story to tell. Silver key anoles only live on a few islands out here. They rely on grip and speed as they compete for food and a mate.
There's one over there. You guys want to check it out? It's on the top of that fund.
These lizards are highly territorial. Whichever of these two guys holds on to the top spot is more likely to get the girl. Now, I could watch this all day. But Anthony's not here to watch fights. He's here to catch lizards. And I can tell you, it's harder than it looks. Anthony's completing what we scientists call a baseline study.
Oh my.
And pay attention in the back, because all this lizard data is going to be important. With expert handling, this doesn't hurt them at all.
You're just like generally looking at it. We can see that this is a male here, about 3 years of age. And then on each toe, you actually have these sticky toe pads. Gotcha. And as you can see, they're pretty fast, trying to get away. And so these measurements will basically allow us to look at populations and how they change through time and evolve as the environment is changing.
As luck would have it, Anthony heads home just as two massive storms are brewing out at sea. Hurricanes Irma and Maria.
The eye of Irma is right now moving through the Turks and Caicos Islands. Maximum sustained winds are potentially catastrophic, 175 miles per hour.
Those storms tear the islands apart. Anthony wonders, can his lizards possibly keep up with this kind of destructive change?
Cliffhanger. You have to watch the whole program. Do they survive? All right, let me find my presentation here. Yeah, I love telling people about this project because they're like, oh, you went to Turks and Caicos. Like, that's a cool, like, vacation spot. And I was like, we were not on the vacation spot island. It's like, we were on a very remote island with next to no one on it, completely forested, digging around for lizards. It was super hot. And I mean, it was beautiful, but it was pretty rough. And Anthony himself is like a human lizard. He like trains himself to be like a machine when it comes to field biology. He like doesn't drink any water, doesn't eat until dinner time, sleeps like 4 hours a night. He was hardcore. And I was like, I was very impressed. Since then, we've gone to the southernmost forest in the world in Chile. Yeah.
said that there was something about how their feet change.
Yeah, I mean, I can spoil the program for you guys. It's definitely all right. But essentially what they found through that program or that research was that after these hurricanes, obviously the lizards that have the biggest sticky foot pads survive holding on to those trees. They didn't get blown off the island. So these hurricanes almost essentially selectively bred these lizards to go from having really small foot pads as the average in the beginning before all these hurricanes to after he returns post hurricane season, they all had significantly larger foot pads and it all within like a year of his research effort. And it just shows how quickly these animals can adapt through, you know, natural pressures like this.
Are you saying that we can watch that show?
That's actually available on PBS. So I think if you just search Evolution Earth on PBS, it'll come up. Yeah.
How did you get the pictures of them blowing off the tree?
Yeah.
You set up cameras ahead of time?
The pictures of them blowing off the trees is kind of a fun story. So the researcher himself, which if you watch the full program, you'll see he actually sets up an experiment to test at what wind speed do lizards fly off of a branch. And so working with him, we set up the same experiment, but we added a little bit of water and put them onto a tree branch. And then I had to basically just don a poncho while we had somebody like spray a hose at me and like use a leaf blower and blow stuff all around. So what looks like a hurricane in the lizard scene is actually in someone's backyard in Florida. And we're actually using an invasive species of anole. And when it blows off, it goes right into a net and then re-released so that we don't, you know, overexert it or harm it too much. But we wanted to make sure we were working with the non-native ones when it came in that situation. So a little bit of like Hollywood magic going on there to like make this thing happen. A-N-O-L-E, an anole, a key anole, or I guess they spell it C-A-Y. Yeah, it's a fun program. It's a really good program to watch. Another recent trip we've just went on just last year was we spent a month in the southernmost forest in the world in a place called Navarino Island, which is at the southern tip of Chile. So I don't know if anybody here has gotten on the ship to go to Antarctica for one of those trips. But this is a pretty like common launching spot near Argentina where people could go and, you know, get on the boat to go to Antarctica. And so what we did was we were working with these researchers, as you see in the top left corner, who were studying the birds that were in the region. So here he's got Patagonian Sierra finch, and in the upper right corner for all my birders here, that's called a fio. And then we've obviously got our penguins. Magellanic penguins. And so what we were seeing and what the researchers were looking for was how the impact of invasive beavers to the region could impact the bird species. And so what happened is actually in the 1940s, while their economy was collapsing, Argentina went up to Canada and decided to get, I believe, around 20 pairs of beavers and bring them down to southern Argentina in an effort to make a new fur trade in South America. Now, yep, everybody gets it. Everybody understands. Now, beavers obviously not being native to South America, it was a disaster and something that researchers have said has altered the landscape at a scale not seen since the last ice age in South America. So all of these glacial runoffs that were around southern South America were just perfect habitat for beavers. And you can see in the bottom left corner an aerial photo of a beaver dam in the middle of one of these streams. And so what's happened is kind of this domino effect since the 1940s. Is what they found is that the beavers showed up. They obviously destroyed whole ecosystems by flooding them, ecosystems that weren't adapted to this. But now with climate change happening and it getting a little bit warmer down in southern South America, they've found mosquitoes have started to use these pools that they've never existed in before in the southernmost tip of South America. So they're right there at the edge. And so with that brings potential like avian diseases to a lot of the native bird species that you see here. So we're working on actually producing a film that kind of investigates the whole history of this, what's happening and then what also could happen and the solutions that we could put into place to make sure, hopefully we get this under control and it's an uplifting story and not a catastrophic one for that environment. And then a little bit more of an uplifting story that we're developing, and one that's actually coming out very soon on a streaming platform called Curiosity Stream, is a program about blue penguins, which are the smallest species of penguin in the world. You can find them in New Zealand and Tasmania, and how they coexist with people in Tasmania, which is a state of Australia. So people actually have these penguins just living in their garden beds, in their backyards. If your trash can flips over in the middle of the night and penguins happen to be roaming around, they might dig underneath it and make a nest under it. It's a very, very interesting relationship. We went to one town where the cemetery was just filled with penguins who had all dug underneath the tombstones and were nesting underneath them. And so we talk about the relationship with the locals, these penguins, and some of the people who are actually helping the penguins who kind of run into some issues when it comes to, nasty teenagers who are being mean to them or, vehicle incidents, things like that. So the rehab efforts that are going on. So that's soon to be coming, and something we're really excited to share with people. We spent a month there this past January, which is great because it's summertime in Tasmania when it's wintertime here. So we got to hang out on some beaches and hang out with penguins in some weird locations like the cemeteries at night, filming kind of the antics that these penguins get up to. After all these travels, though, oftentimes myself and my film partner come back to the United States and realize that we have some really impressive, equally amazing wildlife here in the United States. And while we're really fortunate to get to travel all around the world, we want people to recognize that there are some really great opportunities here to see animals, and you don't have to fly 16 hours to, Tasmania or Africa to try and see some animals. But there are some really great spots you can find them, like this impressive bighorn sheep in Yellowstone National Park, or the critically endangered American red wolf down in North Carolina. And so that's really become a passion of ours, is to, obviously we love to travel, but to start to try and tell stories of conservation and the different animals that you can find here in North America. And so that's actually inspired a recent film that we've done a few screenings of around Toledo, and has just finished up its film festival tour and won many awards, which is super exciting, called Hellbent, which is about two amazing women trying to preserve their community, as well as the hellbender salamander, which is the largest salamander in North America. They can get to, I don't know if anybody's ever seen one, but they can get to be about this long and live up to almost 100 years. And so I'll share a little trailer about this film for you.
The hellbender, it's saying your water is clean. Keep it that way. If it doesn't have clean water, it doesn't survive. If we don't have clean water, we won't survive. So it's all the symbolism of our fight. This is our water. Without water, we cannot live. And when someone tries to take that away from you, you fight for it. That's all we're trying to do, is just say, leave us alone. Let us live the way we did, and don't piss around with our water. Whoops.
Little language warning. Sorry, I should have given it to you beforehand. They were the two most amazing women to get to hang out with and film. So they live over in a place called Grant Township in Pennsylvania. And what was happening was essentially a fracking company from out of town came in and was like, this is a great place for us to dispose of our fracking waste. And this whole township relies on well water. And oftentimes a lot of the people who live in this town barely have enough water to make it through a year. And so we actually camped out in their backyards throughout the whole production of this. And they were like, yeah, you can come in anytime and like use the restroom when you guys need it. And I mean, within like 2 days of our crew of 3 people using the restroom, they were like, our water's getting low. So like it takes a while for this to replenish. And it also just shows like how important it was to preserve it. But they also had the hellbender salamander, which you saw swimming around in those like beautiful creek shots, living in their watersheds. So they essentially have fought about a 12-year-long legal battle with the state of Pennsylvania and this fracking company to try and keep this fracking waste well out of their town. They're honestly like conservation heroes. It's pretty amazing what they've done. And it's made for a really great story that I'm really happy they get to share with us. And fortunately, spoiler, like there's no well today. So we're really excited that that's happened for them. But we've also gotten to go to some pretty iconic locations here in the United States, filming for places like National Geographic. And so we actually worked on a recent Disney Plus program. It's on Disney Plus. It's on Hulu now, I believe, called America's National Parks, narrated by Garth Brooks, surprisingly. And so here was another winter we got to spend freezing for about a month, looking for foxes in the Tetons region. And I'll share a little clip from that.
This red fox is perfectly suited to life in the white stuff. Taking a canine catnap out in the open, she uses her bushy tail as a portable blanket, sleeping like this even during the coldest winter nights. Today, the sun is shining, and a vole enjoys a spring stroll. It doesn't go unnoticed. The vole seeks refuge in a network of underground tunnels. But out of sight is not out of mind. The fox's hearing is her ultimate weapon. Tilting her head from side to side, she zones in on the target. No luck this time. But Grand Teton provides perfect mousing conditions.
So we spent about, where's my presentation? Sorry. We spent 4 weeks trying to film that mousing behavior with the fox. And so what that entailed was waking up at like 4 a.m. every day, getting all of our gear around, getting ready. It was like negative temperatures out, and then driving just through the northern part of the Tetons area, where it right up where it kind of borders with Yellowstone, because people have been seeing a lot of foxes over there, and just going back and forth. And just whenever you'd see a fox, we take a little GPS coordinate and be like, all right, there's a fox that probably hangs out here. And we would do, and then we would sit with it and we would just wait and hope that it did something. And so those shots in the beginning where it's actually where it's sleeping, we had been following this fox for a while, and it just curled up right in front of us and went to sleep. And so we were like, all right, well, we'll get a couple shots of it and then we'll kind of keep rolling. So almost 30 days trying to film that behavior, and we didn't see it until like day 28. And the whole time we're passing up wolves, We're passing up bears. Like the grizzlies were just coming out of hibernation, all because we were like, we got to go get this fox footage. So it was a lot of driving and sitting in snow and just kind of waiting for the opportunity to happen. Yeah.
Pictures of the ball.
So that is a little bit of movie magic. The Vole tunnel shots. So we filmed everything above the ground, and then the producer had like a studio where he happened to have access to a vole, and he had made a little bit of snow and got those underground shots. And so like personally, I love the above ground stuff where we get to like sit in the snow and like wait for animal behaviors to happen. That's where like I really enjoy the wildlife filmmaking thing. But there are some people who like there's a whole studio side to some wildlife films. And oftentimes like I feel personally like it's only justified if the behavior is 100% like accurate that they're documenting. So in that instance, like the vole moving through the tunnels is accurate, I guess. But yeah.
Plus hire you to make this, or do you make it and then pitch it to?
So in this situation for this project, we were actually hired by a company working for National Geographic. So National Geographic had already hired that company to produce it. And so we worked with them to produce it for the TV show. So that's one of many ways that we'll find work is people will approach us and be like, hey, we know you have experience out here or with this specific type of animal. Would you guys go out and find stuff for us? And so we'll get hired to go film a variety of behaviors for different programs. But oftentimes we're also pitching, storylines to different, magazines and things like that. So we're actually producing a project that we pitched to Scientific American. We're doing a film about Mexican gray wolves that's going to be coming out, I think, in October. And that was kind of a different situation where we did pitch that story. But oftentimes then we're also fundraising for ourselves to just try and produce a film. So the Hellbent film was actually produced entirely by private funding. We found a donor who was like, we just really like what you're doing. We want to fund what the next project is. And so that's kind of where that one came about. Yeah.
In your out projects like this, and you film the red fox, you said they took you 1 month.
Yeah.
So the production stuff during this time, you do stock filming, you film other animals, and you use it for your future projects.
So since we have a Zoom going, I'll repeat the question. The question was during the time where we were spending a month out waiting for the foxes, what else are we doing essentially? In those instances, we're pretty in constant communication with the producer that we're working with. And if we see something else that's interesting and going on, oftentimes we'll talk to them and be like, do you want this thing that's happening? And if it's like some shoots are just hyper focused, they're like, nope, we just want foxes, keep rolling. And so in one instance, we actually had to drive by a bunch of wolves on a bison carcass because we're like, they're not going to use this footage, but it's really good footage. And so we would have to drive by. But in this case, we were for hire. They had hired us to go out and film it. Ethically, like I wouldn't go out and film that and then like keep the footage and then sell it off to somebody else. Because our time is essentially purchased by the company and National Geographic to go out and film for that program. So we'll get like scenery shots. We're sitting in the snow. If something pretty happens, we're going to document it. But really, we're like, after a while, we kind of found the hot spots for foxes. We were just kind of sitting and waiting, which is kind of the name of the game most of the time with wildlife productions. And so on a similar note, another episode we worked for on that program was for the Badlands. And in this case, similar to the Grand Tetons program, they had asked us to get a very specific behavior, but for Badlands, they gave us a whole list. They were like, we'd love to see cliff swallows, prairie dogs, bison, bighorn sheep. And they're like, here's 6 weeks, like go see what you can get. And so we spent about 6 weeks in the Badlands, traveling all over, filming as many of these things that they were looking for. And this scene in particular, which is one of my favorites that I've ever filmed, was not in any way expected or something that the producers had asked for. It just kind of happened and we saw it happen and we were like, this is something that we need to get. And so we turned our cameras on and filmed this little prairie dog turf war that you're about to see.
Curious pups are popping up all over Badlands National Park. Mom has her hands full. She spent the last few weeks tending to her young in the safety of her burrow. It's time to introduce them to the outside world. Bison must look so odd. Closer to home, there's something even more scary. Their jealous aunt. As Mom tidies her burrow, dirt is promptly kicked back in her face. It's a family feud that's been brewing for weeks. The aunt doesn't like sharing space. Tempers are fraying. It's a literal turf war. The new mom has had enough. There is no misreading this signal. That should be the end of it. But this dog won't let it lie. Mom had to teach her sister a lesson. With teeth and claws made for digging, they are formidable fighters. Serious injuries can occur. Family. Can't live with them, can't live without them. Nobody messes with a mom and her pups. All clear. The war is over.
I've never got applause. Probably. Oh, from the buffalo? The buffalo were an issue throughout many of our productions. The buffalo we get pretty close to, and we often can like recognize the signs of animals when they're feeling like threatened or nervous. And so we try and like maintain a healthy distance. We've got really big camera lenses. And so I'd rather film with that than risk getting super close to them. There was actually an instance, and it always tends to happen in national parks. And I think it's just because there's lots of people coming in and out. When we're filming for programs like this, all of my closest calls, and it's not a very glamorous answer like a lion that tried to attack me or anything, have been with bison because of tourists spooking them while I'm filming them. And so actually, while we were filming for this program, we were trying to film bison and a herd that had a bunch of young, and they were kind of down in a valley that we had to hike down into because you want to get like eye level with the animals. You don't want to film down on them. And two guys actually came down because they wanted to like see the bison run. And so they got behind them while we were in front of them filming and spooked them. And this whole herd came running at us. And then the mothers with all their young actually did like a half circle around us and started to close in to try and, you know, protect their young. And we had to just pick up the camera gear, and you're not supposed to turn and run for most animals and pretty much all animals. And so we just had to walk backwards as quick as we could as they were coming at us and just stand our ground until eventually, and it felt like forever, Eventually they were like, all right, I don't think anything's happening here. And they just kind of let us keep walking backwards. It's happened in Badlands. It's happened in Yellowstone. Yeah, it's not fun. When you have like 30 large bison as close as all of you are now coming at you. Yeah, really fun. It's really great. After all of this, though, I love to stress to people, especially when I'm speaking here in Toledo, that we have some pretty amazing animals here in Northwest Ohio. All of these photos that you'll be seeing in the next couple slides have all been taken here in Toledo. So that screech owl was actually in somebody's front yard over off of Talmadge. And it was a friend of mine. She was like, there's a screech owl that every time I go in my living room, it pops out of this hole and it looks right in at us. And it lived in her front yard for like a whole year. And this like 11 point, I think, buck was over at Side Cut Metro Park. And then this raccoon, it was stuffed in this tree in the middle of like January when it was freezing cold, was out at Secor Metro Park. So we have some really amazing things here. And we have some really cool organizations that, you can partner with here or get to volunteer with in Northwest Ohio. So like Nature's Nursery obviously does a lot with our local wildlife. And that's where these little opossums were at. And then places like Metro Parks Toledo and Black Swamp Conservancy with their restoration efforts rely so much on volunteers to help, keep these ecosystems rid of like invasive species and things like that. And so that red-winged blackbird was actually taken out at Pearson North. Yeah, so just really cool things here and stuff that I've been trying to dive a little bit deeper into when I'm not on different shoots is just investigating all of the really cool things we have here. As well as a really huge birding hotspot. I don't know if we have any birders in here. So you already know, but it's a very large destination in the beginning of May where like thousands of people will come to Toledo or Northwest Ohio to see all the migratory birds that come through. And so the flicker on the left has actually just been banded by some researchers here in Toledo area. But these warblers, I mean, the opportunities they offer, locals as well as the people who are visiting, the opportunities to see some really cool biodiversity it's pretty awesome. I go out every May. On the right, that's a Blackburnian, I think. Is that right for my birder people? Okay. I'm still learning all of my birds. So there's so many warblers that have little differences, but I'm guessing that's a Blackburnian. I'm pretty confident. So what's next for us? Well, we're actually going to switch our lens or focus our lens on our own backyard now. And so a project that we're really excited to start working on, we've actually begun production on, and we're in kind of the fundraising phase as well as work finding and identifying partners, is a project about the oak openings region. And so for people who aren't familiar, I might be preaching to the choir here. This is a globally rare ecosystem that we have in our own backyard that goes up to North Detroit historically. And, we have so many different ecosystems that you can find within the oak openings region, from like the wildflower prairies, the oak savannas, the sand dunes, and all the wetlands. It's just a really, really unique place that only 10% of is actually permanently preserved right now. And so we're hoping to tell some stories of some of the wildlife characters that you would find here in the oak openings region, as well as, individuals who are really being good stewards of the landscape and the organizations that are helping. And so these are a little bit of like quick glimpses of characters that we hope to feature in this documentary that we ultimately hope to, inspire viewers to help conserve this region. To light a little bit of fire underneath everybody, they're predicting that within like the next 50 years, a lot of people who are out on the West Coast are going to have to move back to the Midwest. I don't personally ever want to live in a place that's always full of wildfires and drought. And so the Midwest is just so stable. And so to be able to start preserving a lot of this region now before it has to be developed and turned into new homes for people is kind of something that's really at the forefront of our mind, is how can we use a film to inspire conservation easements or some more state funding to go and preserve large tracts of land and restore an ecosystem that the Nature Conservancy has dubbed one of the last great places on Earth. And so that's really where our minds are at now. We're doing other projects all at once, but this is like our passion project for the next 2 years. It's starting to develop a film that gets people just really excited about what we have here, whether they knew it existed or not. And, maybe attract some people from outside the region, just like the bird migration, to come here and see what we have to offer.
What are those animals that you just showed?
Yeah, so we have barred owl chicks, which we filmed the whole barred owl story already. That's going to be featured in the film. The red fox, we've got the gray tree frog. There's tree frogs all over the oak openings region. They change colors. They're really cool. There's some unique behaviors that they have that we're hoping to feature. And then just turkeys. I've loved turkeys. I don't know why. They're just fun. I've actually contributed a lot of turkey footage to CBS Sunday Morning for the past few years. And I don't know. We've got a really good turkey population here, and they're kind of characters. And if you ever get a chance to watch them. Oh, yeah.
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 We have two and they follow you and
Yeah.
you're gonna be nasty.
They're hardcore turkeys. Yeah.
Someone fly up into a tree while I was here on campus.
Yeah. They'll often nest in trees. That's like a common thing. So it's pretty cool. I think there's a lot that people don't know about turkeys that we hope to kind of reveal in a storyline in this documentary. That's ultimately what we hope to do with all of our projects, is just inspire people to care about their local ecosystem and, hopefully conserve the area that they call home. And so,
And
yeah.
that area is certainly, the Great Lakes are a phenomenal part of the whole watershed is, I think, becoming a flashpoint unintended there. Because of the 20% of the world's fresh water is right here.
Yeah.
And of course, oak openings is part of the whole watershed thing. And my wife and I have discussed many times how we really are a quiet meteorological area right now, relatively speaking. And we got all this water. And of course, people are saying, let's pipe it down, which of course ruins that two environments that way.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll be something to be including in your film. I assume you're going to be in that direction.
Yeah. The importance of water in this region is obviously very significant. And, it's already a landscape that's been changed so much in the past 100 years from just creating ditches and things like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot that's being done now that we hope to showcase that helps restore it. And there's some really good examples of that happening here in Northwest Ohio, like the Secor expansion at Metro Parks, the stuff Black Swamp Conservancy is doing with acquiring former farmland and turning it into wetlands. There's some great stories here. And I tell people all the time, don't sleep on Toledo and Northwest Ohio when it comes to conservation stories, because there's some really great things going on here. And so I just want to say thank you guys for hanging out and watching. There are some spots, some places that you can find things to watch, as well as our website down below. And yeah, thank you for hanging out tonight.
In the picture.
So that's a burrowing owl chick. I was filming a researcher who bans burrowing owl chicks and does research on them. They were pretty cute little things. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
So for the openings,
Yeah.
are you still working with National Geographic, or have Metro Parks contacted you, or how's that working out?
Yeah, so I'm going to repeat everybody's questions back for the Zoom watchers. The question was, who are we working with for the Oak Openings project? Right now, we're talking to a number of partners who are involved in the Green Ribbon Initiative. So a bunch of different organizations working on conservation in the area. Metro Parks Toledo is involved. They're helping out a lot. The Nature Conservancy is already committed to helping out a lot. And so we're talking to all these different partners, as well as we're, talking to private donors in the region and kind of fundraising. We've gotten some seed funding from a local donor, which has been really great and helpful. And so we're getting kind of ready to start production, and then hoping to kind of do talks and presentations throughout the production of it to keep people updated on what we filmed, because I think that'll get people excited and also maybe help in the effort to, fundraise for the project.
Well, Christy, right?
Yes, Christy and I worked on a film together that I should have featured in here. She did Ploverville.
Okay. Yeah, wasn't it fall? I saw babies.
Yeah,
Born
the
in
plovers.
Lake Bay.
Yeah.
So lucky. And then I really, really got interested and ran into Christy, and she had a special showing downtown at Imagination Station.
Yeah.
And then I thought at the time, they did one about Lake Erie.
Hmm.
I think there were 4 people on the stage and they did one on Lake.
Yeah, I think
Erie.
there was a panel that showed a film about Lake Erie and the algae bloom.
Right.
But Christy Frank and I actually have produced a new film called A Bird in the Hand that looks at
Okay.
a bird banding couple here. Yeah, in Northwest Ohio. So that's doing like a film festival tour right now, but we hope to do more screenings here in Toledo.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, there's cool things happening here. And so it's fun to be able to document them and show them to people because a lot of people don't expect what they see. So, yes.
Well, but actually, we went over to Kelly's Island.
Yep.
Some people. And we ran into this couple that they do banding of birds, and they were, they go there like twice a year, I think. And so we got to watch them.
Yeah.
You know, celebrate the bird, they got to piece out the birds, and we got to watch them, you know, measure the birds and
Yeah.
band them and everything. It's really cool.
So that's the couple that is in our new film. Yeah, they're Tom and Paula Bartlett. They're based out of Tiffin, Ohio. They do bird banding all over Northwest Ohio. Nope, they're their own thing. They're their own, yeah. And so every fall they go to Kelly's Island and they band songbirds migrating through during the day, as well as they band saw-whet owls at night. So it's a very cool experience if anybody gets a chance to go check it out. I've gone multiple times now. I'm going again this year to film a little bit more. But I mean, you'll get up close to cute little owls that they get to like do research on, and they'll let you see pretty close. Yeah. It's pretty fun.
With the Big Speak American Bird.
Yeah, he does the big sit.
Yeah, he does the big city, sits
there Yep.
all day. Yeah. And people donate.
He's a celebrity. Yeah, he's a birding celebrity. So, yeah.
You're shooting in location.
Mhm.
Is it cameraman and the producer?
Yeah, typically when we're on location, we have a very small crew. Oftentimes we get hired, myself and then my film partner, Justin Grubb. He acts as a photographer, producer, also a cameraman. And then we'll take turns filming or, you know, helping each other out. Very small crews though, to just minimize disturbance.
Do you mind to get a simple idea, what kind of cameras you use? Sony?
Yeah, the question was about cameras and equipment. I'll speed through it because I imagine it'll just like blur over for people after a while. We'll use a variety of cameras. Really, it just depends on the production. So like for those broadcast productions, we have minimum requirements that we have to meet. So we'll often rent a lot of camera equipment as well. So we use Sony, Canon. I own Sony, Canon, Panasonic, and like GoPros, drones, all this stuff. It's all in like each one kind of has its own specific function. So like some are really good at low light filming, and that's why we own it. And some are really good at filming like documentary scenes. But then a kind of go-to lens for wildlife productions is this Canon 50 to 1,000 millimeter lens. And it's actually a $70,000 lens that you're just like hauling around out in the middle of like all the elements. Yeah. And so before the production with Turks and Caicos for the PBS thing, the company actually rented us a bunch of equipment. And I think between the camera, the tripod, and the lens, it was about $150,000 worth of camera equipment that I came home to and was just on my porch, like in crates. And I was like, luckily nobody just decided to pick these cases up today. Yeah. So we use a variety of stuff. My go-to right now is just Canon cameras. They just look nice, but we use a lot of more specialty cameras when we need to. Yeah. Yes.
Do all the groundwork, the nitty gritty stuff.
Mm.
Then it goes somehow to a studio.
Yeah.
They do the narration, they put in all this dramatic music. So there's really a lot, that's like, you're the main feature, of course, because without your pictures and, you know, filming these animals and waiting for days and days for them to do stuff.
They don't have much to work with.
So a lot goes in that, not just yours.
Yeah.
Additional in the studio.
The editors, I mean, really make it all happen. There's a lot of work on the back end because, you know, when we go out, we film, we actually don't record like almost any sound. A lot of the sound for wildlife documentaries is done in post-production because oftentimes we can't get that close to the animals to be able to film the sounds they're making. So when you saw the little lizards and their little feet are making the little smack noises, they're running up the tree trunks. There's some guy who's plugging in little sounds or he's making it himself and then adding that in the editing part of it.
That's the Foley artist.
Yeah, yeah.
We ever seen it in the credits.
So
it was spectacular. Really was inspiring. Sound.
The sound was really good in a lot of these. And so, yeah, they really, oftentimes they'll send us out with what they hope they find and we bring back what we get and they have to kind of work with that. And some days it works in our favor and we get more than we expected. The prairie dog scene, they just wanted like young growing up. And then we're like, well, we've also got this wild prairie dog, you know, fight scene. And it just was like, it was pretty interesting footage that they were like, yeah, this is cool. But you know, sometimes we go out, like we've been working on that project with the hornbill that I showed a brief photo of. We've gone to Indonesia twice now, and I still have zero footage of that bird. We've got a photo of it from a previous trip, but all the efforts that we've made to film the sequence that we've been trying to film, we haven't been able to get it. We hear it, but we don't ever actually see it when it comes time to film it. And so we've gone out and sat in a rainforest for 2.5 weeks hoping to film this bird, and we haven't. And you just come back covered in leeches and kind of sick. And you just hope that the next time you find it. So
Are you gonna go to Antarctica?
I would go to Antarctica, yeah. It hasn't been top of my list. I think eventually, I think it's a really cool spot. The tourism aspect to it that has kind of emerged isn't really my favorite. Like it's just like so many people are going now. And it's not that I want to like go to a place that's exclusively my own, but I like kind of worry about that element, like what impact that could have on such like an interesting location, having thousands of people running around Antarctica every year. I hope to go eventually, but I have other places I think I'd like to go before that.
Like what?
I really want to see orangutans. I'm going to be going to Indonesia again, hopefully in November, for a project with Sumatran rhinos. And I'm hoping to see orangutans for the first time there. Oftentimes with the Hornbill Project, we're in such a remote location that you almost see no animals because it's such a vast rainforest that animals will know where you are and they won't want to be anywhere near that. And so it's weird to be in such like a biologically diverse place and see next to nothing. You just hear lots of bugs and see lots of leeches. They have land leeches. They're not in the water. They crawl on the ground and they find you. It's cool. It's really great. Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to take one more question and then I can hang out for a couple of minutes afterwards if anybody has anything else, but yeah.
Kind of a paradox in that people find your work phenomenally entertaining and wonderful, but then it also seems to diminish the sense that wild animals are still wild.
Mm-hmm.
How can you balance that out? I mean, how do you, I'm careful when you put, how do you balance that out?
Yeah, so the question was, how do you balance keeping animals wild, right? Is that how you would say it?
Human beings seem to, like the people trying to take a selfie with the bison or the bear.
Yeah.
They forget that these are still wild animals.
Yeah.
And so people are fascinated by them, and how do you keep them from acting like they're safe because they saw them on their screen?
That's a tough question. How do we not get people, it's essentially almost how do we not get them so used to animals that they don't risk their life to film it. I mean, I think the behind the scenes stuff has become really popular with wildlife film. And maybe when people see that what goes into it to get some of these images, like we're filming bears or bison from very long distances, you'd think they would get the hint that like we're maintaining a really long distance for our safety.
Yeah.
That being said, like it is a trade-off, and it's something that I regularly worry about is like when we go to places like Badlands, for instance, and we show something really interesting or a really exciting location, you know, will everybody flood it and overwhelm it? I don't know if I have a good answer for that now, except to maybe just teach people, I don't know, proper trail etiquette, things like that. It's a challenge. It's definitely like a challenge. I think a lot of people that are like really responsible wildlife filmmakers are trying to figure out now is how to balance showing people something exciting without getting them to then go see it and overwhelm it and potentially harm it. I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, it's a tough one. I can't figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thanks, good viewpoint.
Yeah, thanks.
So give one more round of applause here.
Thank you.
You said you didn't have much to give, and your wife said, what?
No, I always think it's funny when I get asked to do these things because like when I'm home, I'm just like sitting around in my house, like editing video and stuff. And so whenever I get asked, I'm like, what am I even going to talk about? Like, and like, sometimes my wife has to be like, are you serious? Like, your life is weird. But it's just, yeah, yeah, it's,
Well, I want to thank you for coming.
she has on some
And
things.
the
Yeah.
next lecture is in November. It's on November 12th. And it'll be in here, and it's on microplastics. Here, there, and everywhere. And this woman and a team from University of Michigan, I read about in my alma mater's booklet of what she was doing. And so she said, oh, I've never really been asked to do this, but I'd be great to do it. So she will be here that day.
Sounds interesting.
November 12th.